Let's see here. Okay, now we're live. So you're saying Tulsi Gabbard, she doesn't like the foreign wars and things, and he wants to be more isolationist, or
Yeah, that's the feeling that I get from her lately. I think the last few things that I've seen, like I said, I don't really like follow her super closely, and I'm not an expert on her positions or anything, but just the fact that she was a Democrat and she took a stand against her own party and against the Uniparty in general, the Republicans and Democrats, to stand against foreign wars, this constant US involvement in like these pointless banker wars in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe and everywhere else, anywhere we can send our money, anywhere we can send our weapons. I think that was a really courageous move. And I like seeing that in anybody. And I don't care what your party is, what your political affiliation is. If you stand up for something good, I think people need to celebrate that and promote it and encourage it so that it keeps happening.
you know
It's
what I
like when you go to a restaurant. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I heard something very interesting today about a stance on foreign policy I'd never heard before. Because I'd always been a little more on the isolationist side, but then I heard another side of the argument that I never really thought of. And it was this. So imagine if America's not in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, or Syria, or fill in the blank, African countries, or wherever. So if we're not there, it gives China and Russia and maybe others of our quote unquote enemies an opportunity to have more influence in those areas and to cultivate the kinds of people and governments that they want as opposed to ours. And I thought about that for a minute and I was like, there might be something to that a little bit because maybe that is exactly what would happen. So, say maybe like I would have wanted, we get rid of all of these bases we have all over the world because that's what most people do want. Most people don't want us there. So we do that. But then say maybe China, Russia, I don't think North Korea would do this. I don't think they have the manpower, but like China and Russia, specifically China, do you think they would just fill that vacuum and then they would try to spread their thoughts and their ideology around?
Well, I think that's a fair point. I think, and I'm not a foreign policy expert, but what I would say is if you look at American foreign policy over the past, I don't know, 80 years, it's been one of just constant involvement and constant aggression towards the rest of the world. And I love, my dog's name is Patriot. I love this country. I'm an American patriot. My blood runs red, white, and blue 100% of the time. But you look at what's happened to this country, and during our constant involvement and overspreading throughout the rest of the world, what's happened? China and other foreign interests and lobbyists and nationals from other countries, they've come into the United States, and in the place of our best men that we send over to die in these pointless wars and get blown up by roadside bombs in the Middle East for no reason, in their place, they've been replaced with Chinese spies, with various other Middle Eastern nationals that have their own interests in making America do their bidding. And we've just seen America be hollowed out. So, I think we see what's going on with China in Europe, in the United States, in Africa, and a lot of the world, they've already been taking over. Russia, I think, it can go either way. I don't think they're the Soviet Union, but I also don't think that they've just magically erased all of their affiliation with the communist ideology and their communist past. And I know this is a super unpopular take, and I don't mean to get too edgy right off the bat, but I honestly think in the war between Ukraine and Russia, I pray for all of the innocent people and the citizens of those countries, because the citizens really, they have no say in any of it. But I don't think Ukraine is really the good guy. And I think Russia's got enough on its plate. I don't like China, but then again, compared to our government and the way our culture has been going, the way our society has been being run into the ground, frankly, I'd rather just bring all of our boys home, work on us, get super strong, because then at least they won't be able to come take us over like they've been doing for decades.
I'd say Russia and Ukraine, they both have their own issues. Like when Russia invades, Ukraine's going to defend. Now, there's various reasons for the buildup as to why this has happened to begin with. It started, I guess, back in 2014, I guess is what it was. So, and people have been talking about that for a while. This is not something new. Now, I don't think it makes what Putin has done right, but it wasn't unpredictable that it would go as it's going right now. But to move forward on this, so you want to see Trump be the nominee for the Republican Party in 2024?
I think I am an absolutely diehard Trump supporter. I have been gung ho on Trump since he came down the escalator, basically. And I think in the fight between Trump and DeSantis, I'm picking Trump 100 times out of Trump. 100 times out of 100.
Now,
I don't know why 100 just magically translated to Trump. Sorry?
So why is that? Why would you pick him so fast over DeSantis?
Well, what I'll say, I like DeSantis. I think he is a good governor of Florida. I think he's done a tremendous job. I think he has all the right mannerisms and the right policies. And I like him. He seems like a good man. He seems like, he knows how to run things. He knows how to be a politician. But that's just it, as he is a politician. And the appeal of Trump, the draw of Trump for most voters, well, maybe not most, I don't know statistically, but in 2016, what I think the real magic of the Trump campaign is he was the outsider that everyone has always been waiting for. He was the guy that was so rich and so boisterous and so loud and just said what people were thinking but would never say out loud, because he was an outsider. He came in not as a politician. He won against all odds on his first foray into politics. He didn't start as a senator or, like a city councilman or something. He said, I'm going to be the president. I'm going to build a wall on the southern border. We're going to deport all these illegal immigrants. We're going to keep Muslims out of the country until we figure out what the hell is going on. And he said, this and that and the other thing, these just crazy positions that he staked out for himself.
Let me ask you this, though. What do you think Trump will do that DeSantis wouldn't do?
I think DeSantis being a politician, and something makes me wary about the fact that DeSantis is being touted even by like the leftist media as like the sweetheart of the Republican Party. They're very quick to prop him up as the person that should replace Trump. And that makes me worried, because the people that work in our news media and in the political apparatus are scum. They're snakes, they're liars. It's completely corrupt from top to bottom. But I don't think DeSantis being a politician would have the ability to stand up to, like, say, when Trump was president for 4 years, they tried to get him into wars with every possible. They tried to get him into war with Syria. They tried to get him into war with Russia. They tried to get him into war with Iran. They tried it with North Korea. They're going to do that with DeSantis. And our track record since World War I maybe has been, every time that there's a big enough event that the news media can send everybody into a frothing mess over, the president feels like, oh, if I don't send a strong message and start a war here, then I'm going to lose my support base. When they tried it with Trump, he knew better. He said, no, I'm not going into Syria to start World War III. I'm not going to start World War III with all these other countries. And DeSantis, in order to win the presidency, especially against someone like Trump, he's going to have to take a lot of money from lobbyists, from special interests, from these big name donors that will control him like a marionette. And Trump, he has his own money. He's got a war chest now, but he can support himself. He doesn't have to listen to the special interests when they say, I gave you $1 billion. You got to go and start World War III now. Trump can say, no, I'm good.
Here. So back in 2016, the media did push Trump. So by some of the logic you're using now, I would say, would that have been a hesitancy for you back in 2016? Because the reason they were pumping him then was they thought he'd be easier to beat. So they put him up. So to me, I think it's not always about like what it seems. So you would think now they want DeSantis in there because they don't, but I think it's really simpler than all this, because I really don't think Trump and DeSantis will do too much different in office, for one. Because Trump's big message in 2016 was his populist message. And he did do a good executive order where he put a ban for 5 years on the lobbyists, like from the White House staff. You couldn't be a lobbyist for 5 years. And there's a lifetime ban for them doing it in foreign governments. But then guess what he did right before he left? He rescinded it. He rescinded the one great populist thing that he did. Now, Obama started that. Obama had a 2-year ban. Trump just made it further. He made it 5 years. But then he rescinded the whole thing. So that was disappointing in my eyes, because after that, Trump was just a standard Republican for the very most part. Now, he talked a lot of things. He said a lot of things, so he didn't appear to be that, especially in those 2016 debates. He appeared to be like coming out of right field. But if you looked at the actual policies and the things that he did, it was just standard Republican stuff. And I think those are all the same standard things that DeSantis will do too. Now, to the war point, I would say, I don't think DeSantis would try to get us into a war. I would hope not, but it's always possible. Right? I don't think he would, though. But I'll also say this here, too. Ultimately, I don't think Trump would win. So say Trump wins the nomination, and then he's up against whomever. I don't think he would win. I think even a Biden could run again as like half a corpse. And this is the thing I think a lot of the people who really like Trump don't see. I have a unique perspective on it. But even in places like Pennsylvania, there is about 10 to 15% of Republicans that don't like Trump at all. And maybe they even voted for him once, maybe even twice. But between how he was, his rhetoric, his Twitter stuff, January 6th, he did lose a lot of people along the way. And so when I hear people say things like, oh, how good can DeSantis be if McConnell likes him, if some of the other standard Republican establishment likes him, I think they're looking too hard into it. I think they just think DeSantis has a better shot to win the general. I don't think they have some extra conspiracy layer to it where they think, oh, I'll control DeSantis more than I could Trump. It's like, no. I mean, Trump, you couldn't control his Twitter account. No, you couldn't do that. You couldn't control him in a press conference. But in terms of actual policy, no, he didn't do anything that outrageous with that. Now, he said some outrageous things, like about the people didn't like his Muslim ban, for example. Right? He said, oh, we have a Muslim ban from all Muslim countries till we figure it out, like you said. But I don't even think that actually happened. I think he just said it and then didn't do it. So I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that part, but ultimately, I think Republicans need 100% unity if they're going to win. And I don't think Trump gives them that. Like, Trump has a very loud 30%, 30 to 40% of the overall electorate. And then when you actually break it down into the Republican Party, it is going to be very close. Like DeSantis right now, his time is now, I think. He just won Florida by 20 points. He won Miami-Dade County by an extreme amount because of Hispanics, really, because of the Latin vote. And those are people that wouldn't normally vote Republican, but they like DeSantis for various reasons. Now, because DeSantis, great with the social war stuff, people like him. His ship, his star is rising like right now. And to push it back for him in 2028, that's a long time. A lot of things can happen in 6 years where maybe things turn against him somewhere along the line. But I think he runs. I don't know what Democrat beats DeSantis. But I think Trump could easily lose a general election again, for one. And it would also be a slight fiasco if he ran too. If he was actually the nominee, it could be a fiasco. Like, it was already a fiasco just coming out of 2020. But if he's the nominee again somehow, I don't know. It could be quite the interesting story, that's for sure.
Here's what I would say, and I think those are all very fair points. And I don't disagree with a lot of what you said, but what I would say in response, I think, and I mentioned this in our thread when we first talked, I don't think a lot of people understand what's at stake here. I don't think a lot of people understand what the real fight is, because you might be right that the Republican Party might be better able to unify under someone like DeSantis, that, the tweets will be less bombastic and his rhetoric will be less crazy in the press conferences and all that stuff. I think that's probably all true. But I think people also underestimate the fact that that's what made Trump awesome. And that's kind of what this country needs, because you see what's going on now, that like Trump, and you also said that when Trump was president, he did a lot of like very standard boilerplate Republican stuff. His policy wasn't really that much different from any other president in recent history, and that's absolutely true. But I think his his attempts at doing things were thwarted at every turn by his own party and by the Democrats, by activist judges ruling from the bench. And I think, he tried to get the wall built. He had to go around and use loopholes and go over Mitch McConnell to be able to get, a few $billions to build 10-foot bollard. And it was just nothing he did was allowed to get through.
Well, I think part of his deficit will be what you're saying is his asset is also his liability too, because the way he spoke and the way he was kind of a little bit wild, that also didn't help him in how he was working with others in Congress, in the Senate, or whatever. So he wasn't able to get some of the things that he wanted done.
I just don't think that anyone with those policies will be able to woo the political establishment and the establishment media, the legacy media, the apparatus that controls everything is not going to be, convinced that it should destroy itself. And that was the supreme arc of the Trump presidency, should have been the destruction of the machine that controls everything, that controls this country, that controls our media, that controls our healthcare, our academia, everything. Trump's presidency was so detrimental to just the uniparty, to the military-industrial complex, to this political machine that has been running this country into the ground, spending all of our money, and then fabricating trillions more of it out of nowhere. That it was so detrimental to all of that they're still reeling from it, and they're looking for anyone. You look at DeSantis's campaign; he was nobody before he came out, and he had a political ad where he was literally reading a Trump for president sign to his baby, and his wife was like, he's teaching our kids to read, he's teaching them how to be constructive, and he was building like a big Lego wall and saying, build the wall, yay, and like the whole thing, he was this Trump sweetheart, this bootlicking Trump person. And then Trump gave him his endorsement. He got DeSantis elected. And then what happens? The same thing that happened with all of the other snakes in 2020, when the election was clearly, inarguably stolen from Donald Trump. It was stolen. And people can deny that, and they can save themselves. It just happened. It's the objective truth. I know probably a lot of people think that sounds stupid and I'm coping about losing the 2020 election. There's no way Joe Biden won more votes than Barack Obama did.
But what do you base that on, though?
I'm sorry?
What do you base that on, that it was stolen?
Well, there's hours and hours of video footage from the polling places where they're just rescanning batches of votes. The obvious fraud that comes with mail-in voting and with it was never a thing before COVID that you could say that you're indefinitely confined and vote, and that's like millions and millions of people. I think the Democrats, and this to some extent the Republicans, are to blame for not using this machine, but the Democrats severely ramped up their ballot harvesting machine, going to these inner cities and just grabbing stacks of ballots from people. I guess they probably got a ton of voters, but they could have just grabbed ballots and filled them out and sent them in. They didn't allow any scrutiny. We all remember seeing on election night at these polling places where people had questions about what was going on. A water pump broke and they had to stop counting votes until 3 a.m. And then they had the poll workers putting cardboard up against a window so people couldn't see in. There were dozens and dozens of stories of people being intimidated, election workers being intimidated by Democrat operatives. It's undeniable. It was stolen from Trump. And in 2020, what the Republican Party should have done They should have stood up for Trump. They should have done something to fix that election and fix the election laws around the country. But you know what they did? They said, no, we lost. We finally got rid of Trump. There was no stopping him before. We've stopped him. Let's move on. We're going to have Trumpism without Trump. And now they're not even going to have Trumpism. They're going to have DeSantis, and he's just going to be President Bush. He's going to be another neo.
Well, I think people have a lot of confirmation bias when it comes to that whole thing, because there has to be a lot of stuff that had to go exactly that way for it to work. So what I mean is, if there was any tangible evidence at all, why would no judges even listen to the case, even conservative and Republican judges? That's one. Lindsey Graham, when he asked Giuliani and Trump, hey, give me some ammunition so I can throw in the Democrats' face about how it was stolen, they didn't really have much to say. Some of the videos, or they didn't really have anything to say, I should say. As far as the videos you talk about go, some of the stuff, and this is where I think the confirmation bias comes into play. If you follow up with some of that stuff, so like some of those videos, like when they actually went to court, they turned into nothing because it was just like a nothing burger to begin with. But what happens is there are a lot of people that they're pushing that. Trump was first to do it, of course, right? But what I would always say is, and then you say the thing about how Biden, how could he get more votes than Obama? And to me, it's simple, really. No one voted for Biden. Everyone just hated Trump. That's really what it was. Hate is a very strong motivator. As a content creator, as just look around, hate gets people to act. Look at just what happened in the 2022 midterms here. People hated the fact that abortion might go away. And I really do think that was like one of the number one things why in places like Pennsylvania, Republicans got their butt whooped for the most part. And it was really just because of that issue. And it was very preventable, if you ask me. But that's what they did. Hate motivated them out. And so what happens is, I don't like it because Trump, his whole thing was to be a winner, right? And when you go on about the election stolen thing, I don't think that's a winner thing to say. That's like, I'm a victim. Like Trump's playing the victim card when he does that to me. Like that's what Jordan Peterson said about it too. He goes, yeah, that's off brand for Trump to be the victim. And that's what to me that whole narrative is that. And
I think that's such a disingenuous thing for somebody like Jordan Peterson to say. I think if you really think about how serious the allegation that a presidential election in the United States, in a country of like 400 million people, was stolen. First of all, if there's dozens of millions of people, possibly over 100 million people that share that belief, that means that the integrity of our elections has been called into question, and it needs to be validated. But you know what they did instead? They told you that if you question the legitimacy of the election, you're a bigot, you're an extremist, you're a Nazi, you're this and that. And everybody wants to say, oh, well, Trump's complaining about it. I think he is doing this victim thing. He says he's a winner and he's just got to move on with, how we're going to move forward into the next, era of America. And it's like, well, we can't do that, because if our elections aren't real, if they're fake, if they're stolen, then we have to address that before we do anything else, or else one party is going to control everything. And that's honestly how it's shaping up to be. But aside from that, even if the elections wasn't stolen, even if it was legitimate, I don't think, first of all, you look at Trump's success rate at being a kingmaker in the Republican Party, he's got like a 99% success rate of endorsing a candidate and predicting they're going to win and putting his weight on their campaign and them winning. He lost like 6 elections in this past midterm. He lost like 6 out of something like 200 of them. And then you look at people like Lindsey Graham and his, lack of defense of Trump's allegations of the election being stolen. Lindsey Graham's always been a turncoat. Lindsey Graham doesn't have a backbone. He's got about as much backbone as a jellyfish, and I mean, all of his other skeletons that he's probably got in his closet, which are probably the skeletons of young boys, if you had to ask me. But the whole thing, it's absolutely corrupt to the point that it's sickening. And people just want to pretend not to see it. People want to say that, everybody hates Trump so much that they went out and voted for Biden. It's simply not true. Trump was the most popular presidential candidate in US history. And the media would have you think something else, but he got more of the popular vote in the 2020 election than any Republican politician ever has, ever. He increased the Hispanic share of the votes for the Republican Party. He increased the Black share of the votes for the Republican Party while maintaining his white voter base, which he literally never pandered to. He never said anything about white people or, whatever. It was always about all of the other minority demographics. He never pandered openly to the white vote, but they stayed with him. He had kingmaker abilities, and he still does. And you see DeSantis, and it's just like John McCain when he ran against Obama. He got his home state of Arizona by like tremendous margins. I think it was a bigger margin than Trump won Arizona by in 2016, but then he lost. But not even aside from that, if it's not a stolen election, it's going to be a demographically replaced election. We are replacing the electorate of the United States, replacing the legacy of the United States with unskilled, uneducated third world laborers who are coming here as a Democratic voting bloc. So even if it's not stolen, the fact that the Republicans and the Democrats are teaming up to flood this country with non-entities that are going to vote against the interests of the heritage American people who have been here for generations, I think this country is already going to hell. It's already dead. So in my opinion, it's either Trump or, burn it down. If DeSantis is the one who picked, then goodbye.
So Trump, before the 2016 election, he already said, if I lose, it's stolen. Like the only difference was that he won then. And so I guess, how do the people who are Republicans to think as you think, how do they explain the cases where Republicans do win? Is it only like ones that they lose that was rigged, or the rigged they couldn't rig it enough to win in some of the places?
No, I think you saw in 2016 the same thing they did in 2020, but they just weren't prepared for a Trump victory. They genuinely believed that Trump was too much of a clown. The American people would never relate to him. They had no idea there was going to be the flood of support for Trump that they saw in 2016. They thought he was going to get blown out of the water. There's no way he's going to go up against someone with the last name Clinton, who is Secretary of State, who's been, America's sweetheart for so many years, and win. And then they saw him getting millions and millions of votes. And we saw in 2016, that was like the first time in my memory that it took so long for all of the news networks, Fox News included, to call states that were like 99% counted and in favor of Trump by several points. It took them until the next day to announce basically that it was official that he won, and then they still hadn't called other states for like weeks afterwards. I remember being at my job and flipping through my phone for the election results for like literally weeks after the 2016 election, thinking, why haven't they called this state? Why haven't they called that state? They tried so hard to cheat in 2016, and they did, en masse, but they just couldn't do it hard enough. They didn't expect it.
What are you basing that off of, though, the cheating?
If I could go back to 2016 when we were actually there and give you all the evidence, it's been like 6 years, almost 7 years since then. So I don't have it all right on the tip of my tongue.
But too, the Attorney General Barr, what do you say to what he was saying about it, where he was saying that Trump was kind of just off his rocker? And you would think if anyone was going to be on the side about the election stolen thing, it would have been him. But why do you think Bill Barr didn't have his back?
Well, I think probably for the same reason that Bill Barr helped cover up 9/11. All of these people, John Bolton, John McCain, Lindsey McCain, whatever her name is, all of these people, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Mitt Romney, all these people are like balls deep corrupt. They're terrible, awful people. And if you ask my opinion, they're probably child raping Satan worshipers in reality. And I'm not saying that to exaggerate. I'm saying that because that's what I actually believe they do. If you go and listen to the Dutch banking whistleblower, that's probably dead by now. He was probably found suicided with 2 bullets in his head.
But as far as the rest of it goes, I don't know if it's as deep as some people would say like that. And here's the thing. I think some of the conspiracy stuff that some people would say isn't a conspiracy at all, but I think they give them too much credit. I don't think they're that smart. So, like, the one thing about the 9/11 thing would be, I don't know why there's not a videotape of the plane going to the Pentagon. That's one thing I would say. I'm curious about that part. But, like, I do think there's all sorts of conspiracies that are out there. I think they give the people in charge too much credit. I don't think they're that smart a lot of times. I think they're a little dumb. So some of them I think are just too elaborate to actually be true. So like Barr, like, and this is where one of them, they come into play a little bit here too. So you're saying how you think all the rest of them were like turncoats, whether it's Lindsey Graham or Barr because he was like behind 9/11 stuff. But I don't know if it goes as deep as that, as like, I've been a poller in Pennsylvania since 2016. So I think I have a unique perspective on a purple place like Pennsylvania. Now, it's not like a deep red place like Oklahoma or Alabama, Mississippi kind of thing. But, there are some people out there that just don't like Trump. And that number on the Republican side even is bigger than a lot of people want to give it credit for. And I think that's what kind of gets missing from the equation. So people say like, oh, he had more popular votes than anybody. But that was in 2016. You're right. He did have a good win. He had a lot of steam behind him then. But as time went on, he did lose some. And the Twitter stuff got to him. Some other rhetoric, the fact that people just stopped liking him. And that's why I don't think it was stolen. I think that's one of the most harmful things that Trump did, actually, was say this stolen stuff. But for this very reason, because now I think every election is called into question. And not that it never wasn't before, right? Look at Bush Gore in 2000, right? But imagine if Bush Gore was on the other foot. Imagine if it went to the Supreme Court of Florida for Gore's favor instead of Bush. I wonder what like Republicans would have thought then. So it's just interesting to see, because I do think there's confirmation bias in some of these stories here, where they want to believe, they want to see it, and so they do. But I'm someone that I try to listen to everybody. And there's people I've been listening to that I can't deny the things they say. Like, they have some good arguments. So there's a guy named Destiny I've listened to recently. He's super smart. Like, he debates all these conservative guys all the time. He's always talking with Lauren Southern, or he's talking to Chen and all the rest of them, right? And I can't deny a lot of the stuff that he says, I don't have arguments for it. I think he's right. Now, where I'll give Destiny some pushback is his pharmaceutical stance. He likes big pharma and all that kind of stuff. I don't really like that as much. He's too quick to give them credit, I think. But as far as the rest of it, I think they don't have good arguments for him. Like Lauren Southern, Lauren Chen, all the other conservatives he speaks to, they don't have much to say in regards to Trump. They don't have much to say to him. They don't have too much to say in his favor.
Well, okay, so I like Destiny a little bit. I don't know if he's still on cozy.tv, but he was on cozy.tv for a while. I definitely think he's a very smart content creator, but I also think he is basically a mouthpiece for like the State Department. I don't know if he actually works for them, if he's on the payroll. I don't think that's a conspiracy, but I think just his general worldview is that of basically saying, well, the thing is, the government would never lie to us, and corruption's not a real thing. And
I don't think he goes that far, though.
I mean, that's basically, a characterized version of what he does. He goes on and he basically has all of the defenses for the government and for these state actors who are clearly bad faith, where he basically says, well, I think you got to give them the benefit of the doubt. And at what point do we stop having to give all of these people that run everything and have all the wealth, power, and influence in the world the benefit of the doubt? A few points I wanted to address, though. I think what you said about Trump losing support, I think maybe that was true to a certain extent. I think statistically, he won more votes in 2020 than he did in 2016, but they just manufactured more votes for Biden than that, and they took all night and all day to do it the next day. Before that,
look that way though too. The mail-in ballots, the way they're counted, and this is another thing about it. So Republicans don't like to vote by mail. That's so back in 2018, I think I was walking around for Brian Fitzpatrick. He's a congressman in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And we were trying to get Republicans to sign up to vote by mail. And not many of them would. They would say, nope, I vote the right way. I vote in person, blah, blah, blah. But what happens is, Democrats are 1,000 times more likely to vote by mail. And it basically, Republicans give them a month-long head start when it comes to voting. Democrats have a voting month. Republicans have a voting day. And I think that hurts them a lot. And the way they were counted, that's where like the red mirage thing would come into play, where they weren't allowed to count mail-in votes until the day of. So that when they're finally able to start counting them, and it looks like there's more. So some of the stuff I think there was explanations for. But like, I just think that the election stolen narrative doesn't really help Republicans in any way, because, and this is where I go into my own channel stuff here too, like with Radical Self-Respect. I think when you're blaming the stolen part, what are we not doing? We're not taking a look at our side of the street as much and seeing where we can do better, because that's where we have control.
I disagree with that respectfully. And like I was saying at the very beginning of our conversation, I love what you do on this channel. I think it's awesome. I think people in general, but specifically young men, need it. And I think you're doing great work. What I would say, however, is that if the election was stolen, if the corruption is as bad as people say that it is, very, very in the know and influential and wealthy and powerful people say that it is, that is a tremendous problem. And ignoring it and moving on to new issues isn't going to help anyone. And you mentioned the Bush-Gore election, and people like to, and I'm not saying you did this, but Democrats generally, and like neocon Republicans, they love to forget that for the first 3 years of Trump's presidency, he was hamstrung from every angle by this Russia collusion narrative that said that he won the election because he stole it, and that the Russians influenced the election, and the Russians did this and that, and he was colluding with the Russians. And it all turned out to be nonsense. He allowed them to investigate him for all that time and spend all of that taxpayer money and hire 1 million attorneys and subpoena all of his entire life story and bring it into court. And they could find, literally must be the most squeaky clean person on the face of the earth, that the federal government investigated Donald Trump for 3 years and found nothing worth indicting him. They found nothing after all that, which brings me to the next point, which is talking about how the Republicans won't use mail-in voting, that they won't, because they'll say, I'm going to do it the right way and I'm going to do it on voting day. That's an admirable quality, but it is a symptom of why I'm against DeSantis. It's a symptom of why this country is dying. It's because Republicans have this like fantasy that someday all the Democrats and the liberals, they're going to wake up and they're going to be like, oh, I can't believe I believed in all that stuff. And like, if we just hold on to our principles, eventually we're going to win and we're going to get our way. It's like that Stone Toss comic where the guy's on his knees next to the other guy on his knees with a gun behind his head. And he's like, well, imagine if the shoe is on the other foot. And it's like, okay, well, how far does that get you? Once you realize the other side's playing dirty, playing clean is just going to mean you lose. We have to start playing dirty. We have to start fighting to win. And that's not what Republicans do.
Though, too. This is a dangerous line of thinking, though, too, because that's once people think that, we're just one small step away from war, really.
We're already one step away from war. This country is on the verge of collapse. And if this country is on the verge of collapse, the world is on the verge of collapse. They're doing
collapse, though. The economy, would you say? Or what's your reason for that?
I think obviously the economy is in shambles right now, but the more important and more pressing and more long-lasting thing, you look at the Soviet Union, you look at all the countries that were part of the Soviet bloc during that era, and they were able to withstand economic devastation, even genocide. They were able to withstand, but they kept their cultural heritage, they kept their ethnic heritage, they kept their nation, and now they're still standing. America is going through something that cannot be survived. It's not just an economic thing, it's a social thing. We're seeing, I mean, it's a complete dismantling of the social values and the cultural fabric of this nation and of Western civilization. It's happening simultaneously all across Western civilization and only Western civilization, where the native populations of America and the European nations are being systematically replaced. Our values and our culture and our convictions are being stamped on, and we're being laughed at while they do it. They're using the courts, the police, the government, the banks, and big tech to silence dissent, and it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And you know what we don't need right now is some principled political hack of a Republican to come in and say, well, it's time for us all to unite. I would love for us all to be united. I'm a Catholic. I don't hate anybody. I love everybody. I'm commanded to love everybody, but there is no common future that we share with our opposition. It's just not there. There's no future where the left and the right reconcile our differences and live in a country where we can both be happy. The left wants children to be castrated and turned into transgender people and take hormones and get bottom surgeries and top surgeries. They want to murder children en masse through the sacrament of abortion, they call it. They want Satanism to be erected outside of every religious statue in state capitals everywhere. They want, everything they want is an inversion of what's actually morally, objectively good. They are ontologically evil. I'm not saying all leftists, but their values are ontologically evil. And there's not going to be a point in the future where we get together and shake hands and sing Kumbaya. It's they destroy us or we destroy them.
So one, it sounds like you believe in a great replacement theory, for one.
For sure.
Two, sounds like you also agree a little bit with Mr. Nick Fuentes. You know him?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you sound like him. And then
thank you.
Yeah, well, he talks about those kinds of things too.
He's right. So is Ye.
I push back on some of it. I think, even Ye, I think he has some points for things. He just has to get his points across better. And there's ways to do it. Now, again, he goes off into the directions that don't apply to most of us, really. But I think, the way you're going with the whole thing, that's like war, like you said. And would you want to secede from the whatever you want to call this here? Because I think some of the stuff you talk about, it's a little doomer. It's doomer, and things could certainly be better. I do think we're morally bankrupt a lot here in the country. And I do think we could be better served by having some more religion back. But I also don't think it's as bad as you say either, though. I think it's bad. I think there are some things that are bad, but it's not as bad as you say. I think that's what some people want you to think, though. I think people want that. People want people to think the worst of things, to catastrophize things for their own reasons, whether it's an influencer or Fox News or conservative pundits or even leftist or anarchist people. They all like that too. Like the anarchist folks, they would overlap a little bit with what you just said. They like that. That's a step to that. But I don't think we're that far gone yet. I think the economy, if they could get inflation under control, that'd be a good step. But for the most part, this madness you're talking about, for the most part, does it touch your day to day? You see it online, right? You see, if you go on social media or you listen to whoever you listen to on a podcast or YouTube, it's there. But in my day to day, do I see it? Not really. But you go online, yeah, it's there. Right. And I just think some people catastrophize it a little bit. Yeah, it's certainly not perfect. Not at all. Right. A lot of things that need to be improving. But I do a lot of reading, and I read through the books of Teddy Roosevelt's day, the 30s, Franklin Roosevelt, the dude before him, Coolidge, all that stuff. And all this, none of this is new. None of this is new. All of this stuff has been going on for a long time. And there was a civil war, after all, right? And we came together, and we had, what would they call that term after the Civil War? I forget the name of it, when they tried to integrate. But that was a rough time, right? That was a rough time when they were trying to do that. And then we went through Jim Crow South stuff. It was a rough time. But this is a melting pot place right now. I don't think like a banning of immigration, is that something you would be for? Because it sounds like it, you would be.
Yeah, I think 0% net immigration and a
I
ton
don't
of deportations are necessary. But what I would say, you asked if the things, and I absolutely agree that people catastrophize things. I think people grift both the right and the left with these like horrific scenarios that we could go through in the future. I'm not the kind of person that says you better pack your bug out bag and run to the woods and hide from society. Like I said, I'm Catholic. I know that at the end of all things, God wins. The side of good wins. I might not be there. I pray that I am. I pray that I'm on the right side in the end and that I can persevere to the end with that. But I know that God wins, that goodness wins. However, I think people mischaracterize people like me, people like you said, Nick Fuentes. I think people mischaracterize them telling the truth and speaking truth to power as being like overly pessimistic rather than laying out the terms of the war that we're in. I think, you know, we look at what's going on in the culture and whether it affects my day to day. Let me tell you this: economically, I was laid off from my job in the mortgage industry a month ago after getting married in September and buying my first house in July. And I was laid off from the mortgage industry, not because I'm a bad worker. In fact, they kept me on contract so that when they have loans that need to be worked, they can send it to me. Haven't seen one yet because the housing market is collapsing.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's
hot market still.
every aspect of our economy is in free fall right now. And whether or not they get inflation under wraps, I mean, look at the national debt. We've sent what, like $100 billion to Ukraine this year, and it means nothing. It's all just, it's imaginary. You can only keep something like this limping along for so long before everything gets so bad that people are eating each other. And I don't think that's coming anytime soon, but eventually, unless there's a radical change in our economic policy and our financial structure in, you know, what our currency is backed off of, I mean, something terrible is going to happen. But
Oh, we've had
also,
stuff too
let me
going.
ask you this really quick. One quick question, and I don't mean this to be a rhetorical trap. I'm genuinely asking if you've heard of it. Put all of the previous exposure you've had to this news story out of your head for 2 seconds and just entertain me. Is there anything morally objectionable about the saying, it's okay to be white?
No, I mean I don't have a problem with people saying that. I know because people say black power, but if you were to say white power, that'd be a big problem, right?
Exactly.
Where you
And
going,
that,
though?
I was expelled from law school for posting "it's okay to be white" flyers. Okay. I'm lucky to be on Facebook for a week, maybe 2 weeks before I get another 30-day suspension for saying things that 10, 15 years ago would have been commonplace. Things, I mean, and this is a lot of the reason I am Catholic because, and another point that I wanted to make is
Where were you
that,
kicked off of, though? Where were you kicked off of?
what do you mean?
You got kicked out of where for doing that?
Law school.
Oh, kicked out of law school? No, but
Expelled from law school.
here's a Republican argument for you, though. So a private business, whether it's a school or a Twitter or a Facebook, do you think they should have control over who they allow in their business or on their platform?
Yeah, but there's definitely a line. I don't believe in runaway capitalism. I would have a handful of years ago been on the side of like the right wing leaning libertarians and, you know, your average run of the mill conservative, but I have been crushed by the system, by the right and the left, by the uniparty, by the stifling oppressive nature of our society and the culture that we're devolving into rapidly. My life, my personal life, has been crushed by it. My ability to feed my family and keep my home and work a job and get an education has been crushed.
What was your goal in doing that, though?
just activism. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying it's not saying it's good. It's not saying it's better. It's simply saying it's okay to be white. And my point in doing it was to call attention to the fact that for some strange reason, it's not okay to say that it's okay to be white. And you know what happened? I posted those flyers. I got kicked out of law school. You know how many law schools want to touch somebody that was expelled? None.
Not many.
None of them. I've applied to so many laws, and mind you, I got accepted to that law school on a scholarship. I took the LSAT one time and scored so well, I got a scholarship to that law school. I passed my first year in law school in the top quarter of my class, and I got expelled, and now my future in law is over because I said it's okay to be white. Now you tell me if you think that the way this country is going isn't affecting people's day-to-day lives. If that happened to me, imagine what it's doing to people who don't have the resources to even go to law school, to pay their way through it, that don't have, the wit or the cunning or the charm or the dashing good looks that I have to be able to make their way in the world. People are crushed by this satanic society that we live in every day, and they don't have the voice to get to anybody's platform and talk about it. They simply can't. And the fact that people think that people like me are brainwashed, you know how hard it is to be brainwashed into this level of right-wing politics?
I think
There's like Nick Fuentes is like the only person who talks about it, and he's banned from everything.
Who's the only person who talks about it?
Nick Fuentes is like the only one. And yay now, but you go to Alex Jones
Trump the other day.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
So I don't know too much about him. I just got introduced to him a couple days ago. Well, I've heard the name floating around for a little bit now, but I've just started listening to what he said. Like, to me, he goes a little far with some of it. Like, he is out there with the truth. And the one thing I'll say that he does is he does say the truth, and it goes to show people how much the truth can be triggering if it's against what the mainstream norm usually is. But I would also say some of the way he says it, and it's similar to how you did what you did with "it's okay to be white." It's kind of like a poke to the bear. But I don't agree with you being expelled for doing that. But I also think you're poking the bear a little bit too. And that, I don't agree with what they did to you, but you were poking the bear.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I agree. And I was. And I mean, I think sometimes that's what it takes. I think good men.
Principles. That's what happens sometimes. You go
exactly
do what you want to do. That is what can happen sometimes. But like Fuentes, I was watching him on No Jumper the other day, which he's going back on No Jumper soon too. But he's on No Jumper, and he's with Adam and the other couple black guys there. And it was interesting. It was the first time I've heard a discussion like that where there's a couple black guys, and they were straight up talking to him like, "Oh, are you a white supremacist?" He's like, "No, I wouldn't say that." He goes, "But, and he was talking about the statistics with black people in crime. And they're just, and I could feel it as I'm listening to him. I'm like, I can see where he would get some pushback here, because this is something that's not really too socially acceptable to say some of these things. But it's like him doing what you did with "it's okay to be white." He does that with 20 other things, and he pushes and pushes and pushes.
Yep.
So people say he's anti-Semitic too, and because this is the thing: the Black Power people, whether it's Malcolm X or Ye, they get along with the people that want to not race mix, because that's the other thing Nick Fuentes is against. He's against the race mixing. But they get along because that's what Malcolm X wanted too. Malcolm X wasn't for integration. He was and I'll give Malcolm X credit for this. He wanted black people to stand on their own 2 feet without any help of white people, because he felt that white people wouldn't respect them unless they got on their own 2 feet. And I think he's right with some of that, where he's like, if they stand on their own 2 feet and they do their own thing and they kick ass without any white people's help, yeah, that is good. So I get where Malcolm X, I just finished reading his autobiography. And it's interesting to see the overlap with some of that stuff. Now, Fuentes, like I said, I don't know enough about him to really know what exactly I'd push back on him for. Like, I think, like, I don't really care too much about race mixing, but I see what he says, right? I can see he has an issue with it for the reasons you were saying before, where you want people to look like you and etc. Like, and this is what Muhammad Ali was saying. Like Muhammad Ali said, red birds fly with red birds, bluebirds fly with bluebirds. And it was funny enough in that interview, a white guy was pushing back on him. And this is back, I don't know, got to be early 70s when they had that conversation. It's on YouTube still. Look up Muhammad Ali, red birds with red birds, bluebirds with bluebirds. But I don't know. I think all the ships of the anti-integration, and that's all sailed to me. It's all that's too late. So if you want to think like Fuentes, it's too late to think like him now. It's already so far gone from what he would want. It's like, I think people have to adapt to what's going on now.
Well,
make the best of what's going in now.
A couple of things I would say to that is, if you, and I know it's not readily available, it's not made available, but if you actually listen to what Nick says about things, he's very much not against integration. He said, so many, and I've seen so much of his, I used to watch his show live and watch the replays and stuff. He's such a smart person, and he's got like the wit and charisma. I don't know where he gets it from, his ability to, if you've ever watched any of his debates,
24.
If not, you should watch his, yeah, he's only 24, man. And he's having dinner with the president. He's helping with kind of a fantastical presidential campaign with Ye, but he's still, he's part of it, but he fully understands that the United States is not going to be, an ethno state. And he's never advocated for an ethno state. His point is, and I think this is a very reasonable one, that to your point, is it's taboo. It's not really something that's acceptable in today's day and age, and it's not something that socially you can really get away with saying. But in the United States and Europe, we have these countries that are the way they are for a reason. It's not like they happened out of, by accident. People love to say that America is an idea, that you could move America to an island in the middle of nowhere, and as long as you have the Constitution, it'll still be America. It's simply not true. What America is, and what it was until 1965, was a European white country that had, a population of people that were tragically, horribly kept as slaves for a long time and then freed. And there is a ton of racial animosity between the two races because they have this history of suffering and oppression, and white people have this, and by the way, very few white people own slaves, but we have this, guilt stigma about how like we have to atone for the sins of our ancestors and stuff. So there's like this weird racial like paradigm that we have to go through. But the characteristics of America and of these European nations are fundamentally European. It's not something that can be replicated everywhere else. It's not something that every other people can replicate. And that's not to say that we are better than them, or they're better than us, or there's, like one race is the best or one race is superior to the other. And Nick doesn't say that either. It's simply to say there's something strange and nefarious about the fact that multiculturalism only and always applies to European nations. It doesn't, you couldn't go to Africa or China or, anywhere else really, except for a white
people want to come here, though. People want to come to America. People want to come to Europe.
Why do they want to come here, though? Why our countries?
People come here for opportunity, but people don't really go to China for opportunity. Yeah, but
why is there so much more opportunity here? Why do we have the kind of culture that people think is like loving and accepting and will take them and enable them to get a better life than they could?
We have opportunity, and it's prosperous here, right?
Why though?
Why?
Yeah, people take it for granted that these European and white countries are like, they're just where the world wants to go, and they think that like if we replace our entire native population in a single generation with these third world people that, as long as they're taught the Constitution and civics in school, they're going to be throwing baseballs and eating hot dogs at the Yankees game or something. It's like, it's not how it works.
Now there's people from everywhere here now.
For sure.
There's people from India, China, all sorts of people come here, and they do well because, we have capitalism. And there's a lot of good things that happen in capitalism. Certainly not perfect, but there's still a lot of money to be made here, right? But our businesses do go to China sometimes, right? Because they can make more money on the slave labor in China than they could having to pay more wages here. You see that happening, right?
That should be stopped.
What should be stopped?
People
sending jobs to China?
Yeah, the oligarchs that run our policy and finance our politicians should not be able to sell America out to foreign countries. Though.
In Pennsylvania, like congresswomen like Lisa Scheller, who had 4, she lost to the Democrat candidate. And one of the positions the Democrat candidate came at her with was, oh, look at you. You sent 2 companies to China. She had 4 businesses, or she had 3 businesses. She sent 2 of them to China, and she kept 1 here. But she's opening up a 4th in China next year.
And that's the one that lost?
Yeah, she lost.
Good.
Some of it because of that. But she's running as a Republican, though. And this is why I say there's more of a difference between elitists and populists a lot of times than there are between Republicans and Democrats, unless it comes to social issues. Social issues is a free-for-all. But as far as like financial issues go, populist and elitist is the big difference.
But even then, in the social, you're absolutely right about that. You're absolutely right. But I also think the social issues, there's more of a difference between elitists and populists. You look at like Disney, they just released that that I don't even know what it was. I don't follow like the outrage articles that come out, but I have seen a bunch of memes about that Disney movie that came out with like the first out gay character or something, and it totally flopped at the box office. And it's because people don't want that stuff. They're not interested in it. Maybe they don't get mad about it and they don't, want to pass certain laws.
Right? If the free market doesn't like it, the free market will boot it.
Exactly. But they just keep pushing it. And it's because there's these elitists that are trying to force everybody to believe and to want the things that they believe and want, and people just aren't having it.
No, okay, so there's some truth in that too. But then also this. So people come here for opportunity, right? But how could it also be true? There's all this opportunity, but then we also have the disasters you were talking about with the economy, et cetera, previously. So it's like, how do you square both of those things at the same time? Where, yeah, people are still coming here. So why are they still coming here if there's still such a disaster looming on the horizon?
Well, I think it's like Ronald Reagan said, we are the last best hope for man on earth. Everybody knows it. Everybody has always known it. This country is the last stand for free men anywhere in the world. And that was our birthright and our obligation to uphold. And we, meaning my generation, the millennials, the Gen Xers, the boomers, the greatest generation, they failed in their duty. We failed in our duty to uphold that. So we're watching the slow demise of the United States and with it, Western civilization. But people know there's still some blood to be drained from it. They're going to keep coming here. But I also think, it goes hand in hand. The more we've seen millions, they've been saying 11 million illegal immigrants in this country for the past 30 years. Of course, it's not still 11 million illegal immigrants. It's got to be at least like 20, 30 million. I don't know what the number is, but it's way more than 11 million. And the more we've seen that happen, the more the American taxpayer has been sucked dry by economic and social parasites, by politicians that somehow go from making $250,000 a year to being multimillionaires and billionaires with energy contracts in Ukraine for some reason. The more you've seen the financial status and the economy of the United States plummet. You've seen our social values plummet. You've seen young men dying deaths of despair, killing themselves, overdosing on drugs, becoming addicted to drugs and porn and gambling and video games and checking out of society and taking their own lives because it's orchestrated. And I wanted to say this before. You said that you don't think these people necessarily are sinister, but they're incompetent. And it's probably less of a conspiracy and more like people are just stupid, for lack of a better term. I think you're probably right to a certain extent, I think a lot of these people, you look like Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and what's that other guy's name? It doesn't matter. They're all basically the same person. They're all just human scum. They're probably all stupid and incompetent, but they are doing the work of the devil. And I know that probably sounds 90s satanic panic, religious fundamentalist. It's true. It's all true. It's all unironically true. God is real. Demons are real. The devil's real.
The work of the devil.
Yes, these people are stupid and incompetent, and the only way they could achieve the things that they've achieved over the past decades is through the work of Satan and the demons that they commune with. And if you ever get a chance, you should go watch the interview with that Dutch banking whistleblower who he came out and he talked about how he was like the personal banker for like a few dozen of the most rich, powerful people on earth. And how when he first started falling into the circle, they would take him to these black masses where they had mock human sacrifices. And he thought it was just a joke. Oh, I'm going to like an edgy play. And then it started to get worse and it started to get more real. He started crying in this interview. Like, this is the upper echelons of power. These people literally
There's some dark
work
stuff going on, no doubt. There's some power plays going on too. So I'll listen to like Tim Dillon. He goes into it a little bit because he would talk a lot with Alex Jones and whatever. So I think like Alex Jones, for example, he touches on some of it where, yeah, they probably do have some stuff where they make people do things with one another. So they got dirt on you, right? They get a little dirt on you, and whatever the dirt is could be any number of things. Maybe they have to sleep with one another, do this, that, or the other, use some sort of 16-year-old girl or 15-year-old girl's bait, or who knows what it is. But they're doing all of these things to get dirt on one another. So I don't deny there's all sorts of dark stuff going on. I just don't know how orchestrated it all is. And ultimately, though, what to do moving forward, of course, would be, I mean, it's like, what else are we going to talk about if we're not going to talk about how to move forward with all these things? Because I don't think the succeeding like you maybe want to do, I don't know if that's going to work. I think we're kind of seeing it a little bit where we have Democrat states and Republican states, right? And then there's only like 5. There's 5 or 6 purple states. There's like Pennsylvania, like Virginia, Ohio, Michigan. I don't know. Where am I forgetting? Maybe one more. But that's really it. Like that's it. Those are the states where there's battlegrounds. Like Pennsylvania is probably one of the biggest battlegrounds there is. And everywhere else is pretty determined. I'm in New Jersey. It's the blue state here. Now, somehow they'll win governor once in a while. Sporadically, there's a couple Republican Congress people, which does matter for the Republicans on a federal level, right? Because it helps them win the majority like they have now. But, I mean, we're seeing it. I just don't think it's going to be a hot war at all. I don't think it's going to be hot. And I think the hottest it's going to be is online. And I think where you have the most of a point is, as far as the dark shit goes, the morals. I do think we've lost a lot of morals. And like my grandmother's 93 years old. And if I were to talk to her about how far to the left we've gone since she's been a kid, it's not even a conversation. It's night and day. And I think if Republicans could get some better marketing for their messaging, like with the wisdom part, because there's a lot of smart leftists out there. But the one area I see they fail is they fail in wisdom a lot of times. They fail with some wisdom. And so that's where the conservatives and the Republicans really got to hammer them, if they're going to hammer them. So like Dennis Prager will do that. And he's careful. He makes sure he talks about things that, you know, his people will listen to. He likes to focus on the wisdom part because I think he's right. And a lot of people cynically look at it and they're like, who needs religion? That's just stupid. Look at your cloud daddy and all that kind of good stuff. And they just don't know. They don't see like what the problems could be. But I think some of the problems, you know where you see them? You see them in the relationships of today. You see them in the fact that there's probably going to be more single dudes than ever coming up here because social media does emphasize that part too. There's a lot of guys failing, losing in the sexual marketplace. So, I think those are the ways that we'll see society kind of come undone, if it does, is in that part, the families. And that's one thing the left does seem to do a lot of, pushing the families out. They do that. Like the nuclear family, doesn't seem like they like it very much. And that's the thing. And this is, if you're a black person listening to this, I would say, blacks used to be the number one tightest family unit until about 1964. And then Lyndon Johnson, and I think it was the Great Society stuff that he pulled, that was the end of that. And the welfare stuff came. But before that, black families were very religious and they were very tight. And that was that was an asset. Absolutely. But you don't really see that too much anymore. So, and I think that's the other thing I'd ask a lot of people who vote Democrats in the inner cities. I would say, why do you continue to do this when it doesn't seem like they're doing too much for you? I kind of equate it to like a psychiatrist that likes to prescribe medicine that gets you hooked. That's like what Democrats do to get people hooked on them, hooked on the programs, hooked on this, but ultimately no solution. Ultimately no, quote unquote, going to the root cause. They don't do much of that. So I guess that's that about that. Is there anything else you wanted to say here before we wrap up?
Just a couple of things. First of all, thank you for giving me the time on here. I'm sure you can imagine I don't get a lot of ability to share my unadulterated opinions, and I hope I didn't blow up your spot here. And for anybody watching, I want you to know none of this is stuff that he has endorsed. I know probably a lot of people are going to try to associate him with my radical beliefs and my, edgy, zany opinions and stuff. He has not officially endorsed anything I've said. I'm not trying to drag him down or make people think that, he's as much of an extremist as I am. So take me for me and him for him, please. We're both individual people. Don't take it any further than that. But again, thank you for having me. Also, me and my brother, who I think you probably know personally from Jersey, we have awesome t-shirts for sale at bonfire.com/store/based. We're called Based Faith Tees. Awesome. Yes, please do that. Please visit it, bonfire.com/store/based. Get some cool t-shirts. They're Christian, they're Catholic, they're based. And at some point, we'll be streaming on DLive/Based Faith TV. You can come watch us there. And if not Trump, vote yay 24.
Not DeSantis?
Not DeSantis. I'm sorry. I like him, but he's got to stay in Florida. He's got to keep Florida strong and red, or else he's going to leave and they'll replace him with some cuck.
But Ye's got no hope.
He doesn't. He doesn't. But if it's not Trump, I hope the whole country crashes and burns.
Why, though? Why?
It's dead anyway. It's just limping along like a zombie.
No. It's not going amazingly, but there's still a long way to go before it's really going that bad.
I just love your optimism.
Really bad, you think like Holocaust. You think genocides of sorts or internment camps or all sorts of things. That's bad. We'll still a little bit of ways. I mean, anything's possible. I think it is ignorant when people say from the left or wherever they're from, they say, oh, this could never happen. That couldn't happen. It's like, no, anything can happen again. But I also think it's wrong to say that we're very close to it now. It could be in the future, but I don't think we're very close right now. It depends on the course we take.
I love your optimism. And again, I love what you do on this channel. I think it's super necessary. I think I just love your spirit. I get very, like you said, doom-pilled pretty often, and I have to bring myself back to it, back to being positive and a good Christian and just having faith. But keep doing what you're doing. You're awesome. Keep churning out content. Your content's great. And I hope to see you like on, Tim Pool or Alex Jones maybe someday or some.
I don't know where you'll see me. I could be anywhere.
Hey, don't forget us little people.
All right, my man. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I enjoyed
Thanks for having me.
Let's see. Bing.